Well, welcome everybody. I guess you're taking your virtual seats right about now. We're so grateful that you've grabbed an hour out of your day to join us in this session that we're going to get into some great detail on momentarily. But my name is Dave Noonan. I'm an account manager with Red Nucleus, and I'll be your facilitator or moderator of this panel discussion today. But before we get into introducing our panelists and into the meat of our discussion, I was hoping to start off with just a bit of a story. So I'm going to go on the assumption that everybody can see the screen here in front of us. And what you're looking at here on this first screen, my guess is a fairly familiar scene. It's a healthcare provider's office. We've got staff members here adopting and implementing new protocols, things they've never had to do before. We have staff members who are overwhelmed, doing things that they've never had to do before, busier in some cases than they've ever been ever before. And coming into that, we as commercial organizations in the pharmaceutical and life science space, we're still doing what we can to be present in these offices as well, setting up virtual meetings, potentially being there in person, and it adds to the complexity of that environment. Speaking of complexity, that salesperson who is responsible for having that virtual sales interaction, well, maybe their life looks a little bit like this, where they're having their sales interactions in a space with a trumpet player and a chef and maybe a pet, doing all they can to be effective, but in an environment that they've never been in before, doing things they've never seen before. It's something I think we can all really relate to. But what about the sales manager? So that sales representative is led by somebody in the field, and they might have that same responsibility, but times 5, 6, 10, 12 people that they might be responsible for, that they're trying to coach and motivate and help them be successful in this new virtual world that so few of us have had a lot of exposure to or success in. And lastly, but certainly not least, what about our friends in-house in our organizations who have to train people in this new world? They need to speak to sales leadership. They need to work with marketing. They've got to set up national meetings now in a virtual world and get new hire training done. The stakeholder list is endless, and they're responsible to make sure that folks are prepared to not only show up and do virtual selling, but actually be effective in that world. So if I could see your faces, I would imagine I'd see some nodding heads looking at this world that we're in today. And it does take us to what we're here to talk about. And we're going to talk about how a top pharmaceutical company implemented a virtual selling skills program and measured results. So thank you again for the time stopping by there and for our short story to get us started. I'm excited to introduce our panelists, though, because the best part of today will be when I stop talking and these fine people actually start talking. So I am joined today by Alan Rafalco. Alan is Senior Director of Learning and Development at said top pharmaceutical company. Holly Haskett joins us. She's a regional business manager, so that overwhelmed leader trying to lead a group of, in her case, 9 different people out there in the field. And Kristen Oakes, a senior sales consultant. She's having those very direct interactions with healthcare providers in this virtual world. And as I mentioned, my name is Dave Noonan. I'm an account manager at Red Nucleus. Have had the privilege of working with these folks in a capacity that will come to light as we go through this discussion. But prior to this, I was a rep. I was a manager in industry. And so I can really resonate with the challenges that are presented in this exact situation. So before we jump in and get to our first question or set of questions, a couple of goals. If you're taking an hour out of your day, I hope that you'll try to take at least 1 or 2 things back from this discussion that you might implement in your day-to-day responsibilities. One place to look for that would be how to recognize what needs there might be when a market shift takes place, right? So this is clearly a market shift, this move to selling virtually. So we're going to talk today a lot about implementation of a program. Perhaps there'll be something there that you can take away back to to your organization. Secondly, practical steps you can take to make it work. So it's one thing to identify what a need might be, but how about putting it in place, making it work? And then thirdly, taking away something around measurement. When we talk about learning and development, we can't talk about measurement enough. Is it working? And hopefully you'll see some things today that you can take back to your organizations and implement as well. So if you get one thing out of all of that, I hope it's been worthwhile. And with that being said, let's get into our panel discussion. Kristen, Holly, Alan, you guys comfy?
Good.
Ready.
Yeah? All right. Love it. Well, let's get started then. So Alan, I'm going to start with you. I would love to know, before everything hit with the global pandemic that we're all still operating in some capacity or another all around the globe, to what extent, if at all, was virtual selling like we're seeing being introduced today on your radar in any capacity? Would love to know that.
Yeah, no, Dave. I mean, virtual selling wasn't part of our plan at all. We have hundreds of people out in the field that we support, and at no point were we in discussion about how to help our reps talk to or engage with offices in a virtual environment. Now, we do have a small inside sales team, but even their engagement, it's telephone, it's not a video. So completely different space, but similar to where we are now.
Interesting. So net there is not on your radar with the exception of that small group. So this was truly thrust upon you and your kind of training function within the organization.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, but we did, Europe did have, a situation weeks before we did. So we did have some learnings of things that were on.
Very true. Awesome. Well, how about let's go to Holly. So as a leader in the field, so Alan didn't have a real kind of sense that this was coming outside of what we're facing in the pandemic. How about you, as you were leading a team of folks in the field? To what extent were virtual interactions a part of either what you were already doing or maybe had a sense that it was coming at some point?
So I would say we probably didn't have a sense that it was coming, Dave. But we do, in the traditional sense, the 9 sales representatives that I lead and led, through the beginning of this, do have interactions with business development leads across our company who do our contracting for our business. And those representatives of our business did use virtual interactions. And really the reason was their geographies were so large that they couldn't be obviously in multiple places at one time. And they were supporting us and our customers through the contracting process. And so there were opportunities for members of my team and the sales representatives across the organization to join those calls. Sometimes they were FaceTime, sometimes they were on the phone. But for the most part, in a traditional sense, we didn't see it coming and we weren't conducting virtual calls in the field.
Yeah. So interesting, kind of like Alan with that inside sales group, there was some need for it based on a specialized situation. In this case, folks doing more business development and contracting, kind of forced into it from a geographical, how can I make the best use of my time, which I think is something that'll probably be coming in our current situation as well. But again, not something that you were seeing play out in real time with your 9 folks. And so Kristen, as a sales consultant, somebody face-to-face with healthcare providers, I think everybody might be curious to what extent you were getting a sense, were any of your healthcare providers doing or having virtual interactions, any of your peers? Just kind of curious, being as close to the scene as you were, if anything was on your radar.
Yeah, Dave, so I would say, in my specific geography, I was not having any virtual interactions at all, but I did have peers in other parts of the country that were starting to see some offices or large IDNs going in that direction. But I think COVID actually helped speed up that process where they were starting to implement it sooner.
Makes sense. So again, if I'm listening in, I'm hearing that overall not really on the radar. This wasn't something that the organization was kind of thinking, hey, we might need to be more virtual in our sales approach prior to the pandemic, outside of possibly some specialized functions that were kind of put in that situation. Or Kristen, in your case, there were some healthcare providers who perhaps because of their structure, like a larger integrated delivery network or some kind of a big consolidated group, that maybe they were going to push that envelope, but very geographically specific, not some wholesale change. So that's interesting because, and I'd be curious as folks are listening in, maybe if your organizations were kind of thinking this way early on or not. But things changed not quite a year ago for all of us all around the world, but particularly here today for three of you guys. And so maybe let's start with you, Kristen. Let's start with you. It happens. We're sent home from the field because we're not going to have any face-to-face interactions based on the current pandemic situation. I'm curious, how are you feeling about that situation? And maybe if you're willing, talk a little bit about how prepared you felt to sort of potentially start having interactions that were not face to face as you had been accustomed to. I'm going to force you onto a scale. Everybody likes to be put on a scale, right? So for in terms of comfort level, one is I do not feel comfortable at all, or I'm not prepared at all to go and start having these kinds of virtual interactions. 10 is this is a piece of cake and no problem. So kind of how you were feeling and maybe where you fell on that scale.
Yeah, so I would initially say there's a lot of uncertainty, right? I think as a sales rep in the field, we're so used to meeting customers where they are, right? Which is in their office or in their clinic setting. So this posed a really unique challenge, one that we had to really kind of lean in and pivot to the new situation that we were all kind of forced into, right? We didn't all know how long this was going to last. And so I think very quickly we had to try to adapt and learn how can we still be successful in this virtual environment and still bring value to our customers. So to answer your question about the scale, I'd have to say, as a sales rep and the competitiveness in me, I'd love to say I was at a 10. But in all reality, let me kind of, drill back a little bit and be more self-aware of the situation. And probably I would assess and say probably about a 5 or a 6 is probably where I felt on a confidence level.
So interesting. A couple of things I hear there. One is just that sense of uncertainty. I mean, that's a feeling I think a lot of us still have in this situation that we find ourselves in. So certainly that was very heightened at the beginning of this. The second thing that might have snuck in there right at the end was that assessment of confidence. And I think that's a theme that's going to recur throughout our conversation today. And I appreciate the assessment. Listen, I get it. I would not want to rate myself anything other than a 10 at all possible cases. So I appreciate, as a high performer, somebody that's done well in their job to say, boy, I'm kind of in the middle. I'm not entirely unprepared, but I'm not sure I'm a 10. I think that's an interesting perspective as somebody that was going to be asked to go do this. And so, Holly, I'm curious from your perspective. You're our ×9 today. You've got Kristen ×9, not Kristen specifically, but we get the idea. How were you feeling when all of a sudden you were told that not only were you going to work remotely, but your 9 folks were going to be not making face-to-face sales calls as they had been? And then maybe talk to us a little bit about how you landed on that scale. I mean, how did you feel in terms of being prepared to handle this situation?
Well, I'll tell you, Dave, I definitely was feeling at ×9. I mean, I think what was going through my mind was I knew that the company was, sending us the tools that we needed. We were getting Zoom licenses and training on Zoom, and that all came very quickly. But then how was I going to translate that and motivate my team of 9 to use the technology? And, I'll tell you, my team is tenured in this company and in this women's healthcare part of the business for anywhere from 2 to 25 years. And, in the traditional sense, going in and out of doctors' offices all day long is what they've always done for 25 years. So it definitely was crossing my mind, how am I going to keep them motivated and how am I going to keep them connected and focused on this new way of selling, which at the time we felt was probably only going to be a few weeks, maybe even a month, maybe just through spring break. The other thing was the personal aspect of it. So not only was there professional juggling, but everybody had personal juggling at the same time. And so I had to accommodate that and adapt to that. And I knew that also was coming. So I would say my comfort level was probably a 5 or a 6 ×9. I would say, because of course I, was very concerned for my team and how they were going to adapt. And I knew that I was instrumental in shaping that for them and helping them adjust to it.
Yeah, and again, some similar themes to Kristen, not surprisingly, but I'm hearing there, in addition to some of the confidence, it's also that balance of personal and professional, that motivational aspect that leaders are always asked to do, but boy, leading and motivating in today's environment, very different in many ways to what we are accustomed to. And so Interesting, and again, probably hard for a good sales leader to go at a 5 or 6 too. So I appreciate the honesty there. So Alan, this comes to you now. So you've got some people in the field. You've got sales reps who are feeling uncertain. Their confidence is probably ranging down in that middle. If you're high performers or a 5 or 6, maybe some folks that are not quite at that level, they're even lower than that. Leaders doing the best they can to balance things. They're getting some technology input, working with it as best they can. And this is all then coming to you and learning and development. So I'm curious when this happens, again, day one, not your longer term solution, which we'll talk about. Talk to us about how you were feeling and what some of your first steps were walking into trying to help these folks out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think Holly stated it well, right? We didn't know how long this was going to be. So we were really looking for a short-term solution. So it was getting the technology out to the field, training them on that technology. How do you use it? How do you engage with your offices? Really creating a call flow on what this new call would sound like and feel like for you and for your customer. And we were really focused on those two things, really getting them to be able to continue to connect with their offices, and learning how to use the technology in a way that helped them deliver whatever their customer was needing. So that was our focus.
Yeah. So technology, Holly mentioned it to your point. It was, again, hey, we have this short-term thing. This thing's going to be over soon. So let's make sure you can do some digital or virtual connection as needed. Completely makes sense. Did you get any input early on? You mentioned earlier about, global kind of seeing some of this before we did in the US. Was there any kind of input that was helpful there, or were you kind of starting from scratch?
It was interesting because we did partner with our colleagues in Europe, and they were experiencing the same thing we were experiencing here in the US.
Yeah.
Yes, we had a little bit of an opportunity to learn some best practices from them from a technology perspective, and when we were deploying out our technology training, how people were resonating with it. But that was pretty much it. I think we're all in the same space. And I think, as Holly said too, a lot of our reps are pretty senior in the space. And so they were used to going in and doing their day-to-day in the US and outside of the US. So the profiling of our reps were pretty similar even outside of the US.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. And again, even though there was a delay there, I do think, and we continue to be often going through things at very much that same time. We'll go back, Alan, maybe get your thoughts before we talk more about that long-term solution next. But let's go back to Kristen and Holly just for a moment. So again, knowing how you were feeling when everything happened, again, where your confidence was and the uncertainty and trying to go about your job, as the technology training came through, kind of getting you guys the technology and then trying to get you okay, how do we use it? How do we set it up? How do we make some of those connections? How did that resonate with you? Did it seem to hit the mark? Did it kind of do what it needed to do? And Holly, we'll start with you and just kind of how you saw that layout with your 9 folks.
Well, I think it goes without saying. I mean, we still had a number to meet, so it resonated really well because that was what we were going to use. I mean, that was what we were being given. But I think that the representatives did embrace it. It was a way for them to continue to connect with their customers when they weren't able to leave their homes.
Yep.
And I think that the biggest challenge was on the customer end with encouraging the use of the technology. And so I would say that was a challenge, as well as us learning really how to communicate with them once we did get them on the technology, whether it be on the phone or FaceTime or Zoom or whatever platform they were using.
Interesting. So the two things I'm hearing there, and we'll get Kristen your input as well. One is the technology piece is not just internal. Our conversation today is largely internal, but it takes two to virtually communicate, or more in the case of our chat today. And what does that look like in terms of encouraging or helping them get where they need to be on the customer side? But then it's what happens once you're on. That's not necessarily technology training. That is more a skills conversation, and that didn't seem to be maybe where it needed to be. Kristen, how about you? You're face to face. You're being asked, as Holly mentioned, we still got to try to hit a number in a respectful, empathetic way, but we still are trying to do our jobs. How did that technology training hit the mark, and how are you feeling after that?
Yeah, so to Holly's point, I think there's definitely two pieces, right? There's our piece and us feeling confident in using the technology, and I think there's no doubt that that training really helped us to go be much more focused in the field with our customers one-on-one. But the customers were still struggling, so we had to really meet our customers where they were and be flexible to their needs and their wants, and really kind of utilize the platform that they were comfortable using. So I think that was still a challenge. But Dave, kind of back to your point, there was still that missing piece. Like once we got the customer on the line, it's, it was how do we continue to build on the sales skills that we're used to doing face to face, but in a virtual setting. So I think there was still that missing piece that we were needing.
Yeah. So I'm seeing that. So Alan, before we kind of switch gears and start talking about kind of the larger process you went about to kind of go forward, did you kind of hear that feedback that there was, what I'm hearing from Kristen and Holly was that there are these two tracks. There's this technology track that's clearly really important, but also maybe this kind of more skills-based track that needed to be part of it. Were you hearing that feedback after that initial first implementation?
We were hearing lots of feedback, and we took the time to listen. And the one piece obviously was technology was new to all of us, including our customers. So our messaging was practice, practice, practice. Open up those Zoom calls, those different team calls, practice within your team, really hone in those skills, because we're just going to get better with more practice. So that's really where feedback was. But then the other piece we started hearing was, hey, we are practicing. We're really good with this technology. That was great. But now it's different selling virtual environment. Like, I'm not really comfortable being on camera. I'm in this conversation and things get quiet really quick, and I'm not quite sure what's going on in the room. Where I don't even know who to even get in touch with in this office. Like, I'm new to Bear, and I don't know who to contact. I mean, every time I reach out to, I don't think I got the right person. So there were lots of different challenges. Just once they did learn the technology, how do you engage our customers in a way that's meaningful?
I love it. Yeah, that's I mean, I can, again, putting my rep and manager hat back on, I can see both of those tracks converging here a little bit. And I think it takes us into this next phase of the conversation, which really I think gets into the meat of our dialogue today, which is after you kind of responded quickly in a way that seems like it helped, having your constituents here on the line letting us know that, but it didn't quite hit the mark. You get that feedback. How did you go about the process then of selecting what that next more intentional training approach needed to be, and then maybe also talk a little bit about the implementation? I'm starting with how you went about the selection process. I'm sure there's people on the line today that are curious. How did you build it? Who did you talk to? How did that all kind of go down?
Yeah, so I mean, coming into this, having an experienced sales force and knowing that, face to face, they do really well. So when we're looking to source a solution, a learning solution for a virtual environment, we're really looking for a foundational program, something anyone and everyone can connect with, from the manager down to the rep. The other thing we're looking for was something that complemented our engagement model. So nothing that conflicted with how we sell or how we speak to our customers. And the third thing was something we could move quickly with. Like, things are moving fast. It's been a couple months since this all happened, and we really need to get our reps feeling really comfortable in this new space. So we need something off the shelf that we could put through our LMR process and move through swiftly to get this implemented. And so that's what we found with making virtual reality. Was it was foundational. It incorporated a sales manager journey, a sales rep journey. The plus was the coaching sessions. Managers are used to sitting in the passenger seat Monday through Thursday coaching the reps. How do we incorporate coaching in this new model? This program offered that. So it really checked all the boxes that we needed in order to really drive performance. And so we decided to go with making virtual reality and just piloting it. We piloted it with 50 people. And as I said earlier, we felt as though newer people to enroll struggled a little bit more because they didn't have or know who to reach out to in their offices. So we targeted one specific franchise. We looked at new people enroll 12 months or less, and that's who we worked with. So we had about 10 managers who were new enroll, 12 months or less, about 20 to 25 reps new to role. And then we also added all of our learning and development associate directors who would then train it. So let's put everyone through the pilot and have them experience it and then see what the results are. And so, you know, those are the things that we put into place. And so we ran that pilot.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to take just a step back. I'm hoping everyone can see the screen here where we did actually bring up an overview of what that program looked like. I'll walk through it. We were very fortunate at Red Nucleus to work collaboratively with you guys in putting this into place. So I'll just take the audience through what that structure looked like. So as we talk through it later and some of the nuances, it'll be clear in what that looked like. So Alan, to your point, it definitely started with having a discrete sales manager journey. For Holly and all of her colleagues, we can't forget how important they are to the process. So it had a blended approach. So there was a micro-learning component that they were able to take via the learning management system to kind of get grounded in some of the basic principles of kind of the context for virtual leadership. And then there were 3 webinars or workshops that were rolled out after that on leading virtual sales, coaching the team, and then building a cadence in virtual times. This idea you mentioned that we're not sitting in the front seat 4 days a week and then in our office one day. That rhythm that we get into was lost. So how do we kind of rebuild that? Is how that particular session ended. I will point out, Alan, something that I know you and I had a conversation about as well, is all of these sessions are intended to be very collaborative as well, really leaning on some of that experience that you were referring to, that there may not be a silver bullet out there for this situation that we're in. So how do we really pull the best from our folks out? And that's how these were definitely designed. But there was a sales rep journey as well, knowing that Kristen and her colleagues needed something very oriented to the work that they were going to do. And so that also started with a micro learning program. So some time on their own to really think about virtual selling and virtual interactions. And then there were 4 webinars that followed, each breaking down a part of the selling process, from gaining access and building rapport to then asking questions to bringing relevant insights to kind of the conversation, the sharing of messaging, and then how do we handle objections and close. And to your point, Alan, it's not a sales model. It should generally align to any model that might exist out there, but it's very skill based, so that we can really focus on some of the skill that was brought up before. And just as a teaser, the green boxes in the corners there were measurement that you actually put into place to determine if it worked or it didn't. So we are going to get there a little bit later in our conversation, but I do want to point that out. And then right down the middle, everybody comes together. There are no skills that get developed in the space that we work in if they are not coached. So Holly meeting Kristen in the middle and having these conversations, that practice you need on Zoom, it's the same practice you need with the skills, so that you see there in the gray in the middle. So I promised I wouldn't talk a lot today, so that's probably all the talking that I'll do. Alan, would you reply anything back to that, having walked through that? Anything else that comes to mind as far as the selection process? Otherwise, we'll hear from Kristen and Holly.
Yeah, just to add to the other point, it is a very highly collaborative, best sharing session. The program guides the conversation. It provides great tips and things to avoid in a virtual environment when you're going through all of those webinars. But really, the best piece of this is everyone sharing their experiences. Every rep out there has had some wins and they've had some things not work so well. And coming together and just hearing how other people have navigated the space, how they've engaged people, how things haven't worked. I mean, that best practice sharing was the richest experience from this. And it really wasn't us telling them everything to do. It was really them talking about it, figuring it out, sharing with one another, and then flip to the slide, and everything that we had listed, and not some, they've already talked about. So it was a great program in that sense.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the additional color there, and I think some of that will come through when we get to Holly and Kristen and how they felt about now getting this round of training, being part of the pilot. But before we do that, we're going to keep everybody in a little bit of suspense. We do have a poll question here, and we're going to see if my technology skills are up to snuff, and if I can actually launch this poll effectively and get some feedback from our attendees today. Because I'm curious, to the extent that some of the folks on the line today, whether you personally have implemented some kind of virtual selling skills program, or if you know if your organization has, even if that isn't your responsibility, be curious kind of where you are in that journey right now. So I'm going to click launch on the poll, and it looks like the poll is open. So I'm going to kind of wait here. I'm seeing some results coming in. So take a moment, if you would please, and answer the poll, and then we'll close it out and share with you some of the results. So got some results coming in. Some equal balance here I'm seeing. Okay. All right. Fast and furious now. All right. Very good. We'll just give another, I don't know, 15, 20 seconds or so, not to cut anybody off from sharing, but just for the sake of keeping our time moving. All right. Looks like things have slowed. We've got like 65% participation so far and about a minute open. All right, we're going to close it up. Thank you, everybody, for participating. I'm going to hit close. And I'm going to share the results now on the screen. So team, can I get a thumbs up? Oh, can anyone see the results? Alan, can you see the results?
I can,
Yes.
yes.
Okay, so it looks like 34% fully implemented a solution so far. So a fair portion of the group has actually gone as far as implemented something pretty comprehensive, as we've talked about here today. Another 50%, about half the group who participated, and 70% of the folks online did participate. So thank you for that. Are in some early implementation, ongoing discussions, maybe not all the way there just yet. And about 16% just are not quite there yet. So so I think, I'm hoping anyway, and I'll just hide that now, that this is valuable for everybody listening, that if you've implemented something out there and you're watching, how does it compare maybe to what we're talking through today? If you're in discussion, maybe there'll be some good takeaways, and certainly if you're not there yet, maybe there's some value in hearing how we rolled out. So so thank you much. And so I held you in suspense long enough. Holly, let's go to you. You got the technology training when you were a 5 on your confidence scale. You weren't really sure. You felt like, man, maybe it's the skills piece that's kind of not there yet. Talk to me about how it felt being part of the pilot and watching this particular program roll out, even subsequently to the broader audience post-pilot. Be curious what your experiences were.
So lots of experiences, and I would say, watching it all unfold, making virtual reality really brought skills that reps really didn't have to think about when they were in person in the office, and brought attention to them during the pilot. Things like setting an agenda with the physician on the other end of the phone, just setting expectations, asking them how much time they have. Because when you're in the office, standing across from a healthcare professional or sitting across the desk from them, you can see when the nurse peeks in the door and says, hey, you got to come see more patients. But when you're in a video situation like this or on the phone, you can't necessarily see that. So they learned a lot about, setting the expectation of the call, asking really good focused questions, bringing really, tight, concise insights that really helped the healthcare professional stay focused on the call, and then, of course, delivering the sales message. I'll also say, and Alan mentioned this a little bit earlier, the collaboration that it created on the regional business manager calls, so the sales manager calls that I participated in, was robust, because we were all experiencing so many different things with our representatives across the country, and different levels of access that we were able to have with accounts. And then it also brought great discussion amongst the sales representatives on their calls. I think finally, I really saw two different things. I saw in the pilot, I worked with a representative who was brand new to his territory. He had just moved to that city. He was new to women's healthcare, didn't know a soul. And he really took this. He started his job actually right before the pandemic. So he took this and really ran with it because it was exactly what he needed to be able to access his new customers virtually. So that's one, great success. And then I think the other is just one of my own representatives who has been with the company for over 20 years, and she's been in the same market selling the same product. She's one of those really fortunate sales representatives in our industry. And it wasn't until a couple of weeks ago, and she's almost through with the actual training, that a light bulb went off. I mean, it was a call that I was on with her, with our business development lead, and with three people that are in a very large teaching institution that she calls on. We were all on a video call, and to just watch the interaction between us and those players in that account, and then the interaction amongst the three of them on the phone, really collaborating. We set the agenda, we had everything laid out. We were able to show on the video screen some data. And, we hung up the phone and she and I stayed on, or hung up the video and she and I stayed on, and she says, okay, I'm sold on this. I mean, she just felt really great about the interaction. I think the beauty of it was she was able to have all those people on the phone at the same time, and it saved her time too. Very different from being in the office.
That's awesome. I get really excited when I hear that light bulb. I think in learning and development, that's always the goal. I would think, Alan, that's your day-to-day job, is how do we get those light bulbs to go off for people, right? So how do we get there? Holly, I'd love if you wouldn't mind elaborating a little bit on a comment you made earlier, and then based on the sort of response you saw, are you getting the sense that that we need new skills in this time of virtual selling, or is it skills that we have, but maybe we're using them a little bit differently than we have before? I think there's discussions when you see it online and people are talking about, do we need brand new things, or do we just need to kind of look at them differently? What was your experience in folks going through this program in what was actually needed?
No, I think when you take a step back and you look at the skills that we discussed, they are very basic things. But I feel like drawing attention to them and really, I guess, emphasizing the need to make sure that you follow kind of, not necessarily the steps, because that sounds like a sales model, but to just focus on those skills and the structure of the call, because it's so important, I think, to make sure that you keep the attention of the healthcare professional and have empathy and be aware of the amount of time that they are going to give you, and have a good use of both of your time, good two-way dialogue. And a lot of that are things that we've done in the field for years in-person interactions, and just kind of taken it for granted. So I think it's taking, skills that we're already using in the field and kind of bringing them to a little more of a heightened presence or focus, attention.
Yeah. That's the sense I was getting when you were talking through it, as far as, and I was very curious what the actual observation would be. We make some assumptions about what it is, but to hear it played out in real life is very interesting. And to that point, Kristen, again, the technology training was well received. It was needed, but you also felt like maybe something was missing. So being part of this pilot, how did you resonate with it, and how did things kind of proceed as you received the opportunity to go through the program?
Yeah, there's no doubt that this program really added new skill sets, right? Going from face-to-face to virtual, it's definitely a little bit different, but it's just building on those skills that we already had. And what was really cool about this program is it really allowed us to focus on that call continuum, right? So we're focusing on building dialogue, building that rapport, then moving into asking really good, solid questions and listening to our providers, their needs and kind of where they were. Then sharing that data, right? Bringing that value component in, and then really closing the meeting. That's what we're there to do. Like, they know that we're there to do a job and to bring value to them and their patients and their customers. They're our customers. So I think for me, it was kind of just solidifying all that together, and just really focusing on those new skills.
Yeah. Call continuum. I mean, it's still as necessary today in a virtual environment as it would be if we were there face to face. And so having skills now and looking at some of these very foundational skills, but through a new lens, and maybe that's one way we can think about it. It's skills are skills in selling, but it's the lens through which we're looking at it. Is it through the lens of a face-to-face interaction, or is it through, in this case, literally the lens of a camera and having a virtual interaction? And how does that change? And then Holly, you had to think about how does that change for your individuals? Because you could have high performers in a face-to-face environment who all of a sudden now are not so much in virtual, and maybe some folks who actually do better. So again, a challenge that I think people listening in today probably can really resonate with. Alan, but coming back to you, we're going to talk about measurement next and kind of what you saw actually sort of culminate from this actually in the measurement side. But I'm curious, is this the kind of feedback you got inside? I mean, we're hearing from two people that were part of the pilot here, but broadly speaking, as this rolled out and people went through the program, what kind of feedback were you hearing, and how is it different than when you just rolled out the technology?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was much different. We've gotten lots of feedback from all of our sessions, from all of our franchises. And, you know, even though it's basic and foundational, I think as Holly and Kristen said really well, it's skills that you just need to bring up to the forefront and maybe tap into a little bit more, pay more attention to now than maybe you were doing in the office. Or maybe you were always doing in the office and now virtually, you just gotta hone in on that a little bit more. So lots of great positive feedback across all of our franchises. So nothing but positive results.
Yeah, so it sounds like consistent to what we're hearing from Holly and Kristen. So good feedback, but good feedback's only part of the loop you're looking for in learning and development. We want to talk about measurement, I think, next. And so so why don't we start, Alan, with don't tell us the actual results you said. I'm really curious, and I think people on the line probably are too. What did you do for measurement? Like before we even rolled anything out, like what was the thought process? What kind of structure did you put in place so that you knew when it was over, you'd have the information required to measure and see if you had success or not?
No, thanks, Dave. So yeah, we piloted this with the 50 people that we said, and as part of the pilot, we did 2 levels of measurement. The first level was confidence. As Kristen and Holly said, confidence when they talked to their people or thought about it themselves was really at the forefront of what was going on. And so we wanted to measure what level of confidence people had before they went into the program and to making virtual reality, and then afterwards. So we sent out a survey via Microsoft Forms, simple little survey, and essentially asked the managers, what is your confidence level coaching a team in a virtual environment? And to the reps, what is your confidence level selling or connecting or engaging with your customers in a virtual environment? And then at the end of the program, for both the managers and for the reps, we did the same type of survey saying, now that you've gone through the program, what is your confidence level leading a team? And for the reps, now selling or engaging with people in a virtual environment. So that was one. And then the second thing was application, right? So are we really going to be able to measure that there was an impact in performance? And so using the scorecard on the coaching sessions, we had all the managers in the pilot go through the coaching sessions with the reps in the beginning and measure it. There's a rubric, there's a score of 1 to 3, 1 being on the lower end and 3 being on the higher scale. And then we had Microsoft Forms filled out where the managers would then take those results and populate them. And then after each of the sessions, the manager then went through the same scenario with the same rubric scorecard and then measured their scores. And then we did a pre and a post and to determine if there was a lift in performance. So those are the 2 things that we measured: confidence and then application of skill.
Awesome. So to summarize, on the confidence side, it was self-reported confidence. So the survey was just a simple, quick, easy way, pre and post. Tell me via the form how confident you are in doing some of these relevant skills. And then the second piece around application was actually taking those coaching sessions beforehand, before any training, and seeing how folks performed, and then actually doing it again later, a second time, and seeing if there was any delta there in any direction, positive or or otherwise. And so I will say that that's not a core piece of the program. You guys here on the line today get all the credit for coming up with a way to do that. And we are going to hold everybody in a little bit of suspense for kind of what you found from a data perspective, although we are online today, so we're thinking they're probably going to be pretty good. Before, Alan, you share some of what you found in that, though, I'd love to get a sense, maybe Kristen, from you first. How were you measuring success after going through the program? How did you kind of measure your success and whether or not the investment of time you made in the pilot and then implementing the skills came through or not? And what did you find?
Yeah, Dave, so I would say the first thing was the coaching sessions, right? I think, having that time to practice with our RBMs, each different scenario really build a lot of confidence, right? We all know that practicing builds that confidence. So I think that was a key component. But the other thing I'm seeing too is I definitely have the confidence in my sales discussions with my providers. We work in an industry where we're actually selling a device, and so it's an elective procedure. And so I'll be perfectly honest, I'm having one of the best sales years that I've had. And I think, looking back at the fact that we're in this COVID situation, I think really embracing this virtual environment and really honing in on the skills that this program taught has really had some impact in that success. So I think it's all about, just taking what we have and then actually just applying it.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to gloss over that entirely. If you're a salesperson, I would think your measurement of success absolutely comes down to whether or not you're seeing your business move in the direction that you want it to. So first of all, congratulations on having success here in the situation that we're in. And while it's very hard to isolate variables, certainly the focus on the program and some of these foundational skills could certainly be a part of that process. So thank you for that, Kristen. Holly, how about you? Just from like a measurement perspective, how are you looking at kind of the measurement of success here in the program for you personally as a leader, but then also as you see folks go through the program, whether on your team or the pilot group? How are you kind of seeing or measuring success?
So for me as a coach, I mean, I feel like me being in the healthcare professional shoes by acting as a coach as they were rolling through these scenarios. I mean, when they used the skills or they didn't use the skills, I felt a certain way. I mean, which I think gives me a lot of great perspective to coach them as I'm on these virtual calls with them. You know, if you're sitting on a video call with somebody and you don't establish how much time you have and you don't establish what you're going to talk about, it's kind of hard to sit there because you're not really sure when it's going to end. And so when they did that early on, I had to tell them how it felt to me so they could understand how it felt to their healthcare professionals. So it really gave me great insight on how to coach them, really. So I consider that a great success. And I would say for the reps on my team now, I think the example I just mentioned a little while ago, hearing them, feel good about their calls and seeing that when they apply the skills that they're actually moving the ball forward with their customers. I think that's the way I'm measuring success with the members on my team for sure. I think when they see the value in approaching their sales calls like this in the virtual setting, they see the success, they're just going to do more of it and continue to have success.
Absolutely, that persistence to go through. So from Kristen, there's a measurement component that does come down to results, something we're all ultimately measured by. But sometimes it's not that hard and fast. Sometimes it is perspective. I mean, to hear you say, Holly, that like to go through a training program and one of the successes is now you go, oh my gosh, that's what my customer feels like. We have to change how we do things. That's a huge win and something I think we can all resonate with, and how that would then change your ability to coach people effectively. And then, yes, I think measuring success by people's willingness to go down this road. I don't know as a salesperson where I would have fell on that continuum when I was selling. If someone said, now you're going to sell virtually, I might have been very resistant to that. I loved that energy that came from interacting in a live environment, and I don't know how I'd feel. So if you're seeing people, their perspectives change and tell you, okay, now I get it. Now I'm sold. A lot of value, and hard to measure on paper necessarily, but a lot of value that can come from that. But Alan, you did measure stuff on paper, and I did find out before our session today that you are limited, understandably, to how detailed you can be in sharing the results. So I think everyone will understand that you'll share kind of what you're allowed to share on this level. But what results did you see from your confidence surveys and the application measurement?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the overall response is I shared the results with sales leadership, and every franchise bought into the program right away. And
Nice.
so it's
Yeah.
been deployed to every franchise. Everyone's currently working on it. But to give you more specifics, the confidence pre and post, there was more than a double increase in the level of confidence across managers and reps.
Wow. Okay.
And then for the skill piece, the application, it was a significant measurable improvement.
Okay.
So there, everyone increased every category that they were in. Feedback from the managers and from the reps who did the pre and post said they felt obviously more comfortable, but obviously the manager said that they heard the reps talking differently in the post session than they did the pre. And so really that's really where the proof was. And
Yeah.
honestly, being someone in learning and being able to help so many people do their job even better, having those results was just super rewarding for me and for my team.
Awesome. Yeah, so that's incredible. First of all, a doubling of confidence is absolutely incredible. And again, I know you can't even go into all the specifics there. The adoption across the organization, you're not going to get leadership buy-in unless there was certainly success that was really palpable, and could be potentially replicated elsewhere. And man, to be able to have results down to the actual skill level to speak to and to see the differences can be absolutely incredible. So thank you for sharing what you're allowed to share on that topic. And so we're going to finish up in a minute with having you guys give us just one or two takeaways, and then I'm going to ask you to take out your virtual crystal ball and kind of give our audience a sense of what you think is next when it comes to these virtual interactions. I will say to the audience, though, I do see a couple of questions in queue, and one specifically about soft skills that Alan and crew I'd love to give you guys when we're done, and we'll leave some time at the end for those questions. But if you do have questions for the panelists, for me, feel free to type them into the question functionality, and we'll do our best to get to those when we finish up. But as I mentioned, let's go around the horn and get a couple of takeaways. Kristen, I'd love to start with you. Give me just one or two takeaways from this experience, and then again, crystal ball. What do you see coming in the future? What's next?
Yeah, so I would say something that's been really positive about this program is that we've actually heard feedback from customers, right? So that's another way to measure success. And so much so in the fact that customers have actually identified that we are having more impactful conversations with them than other representatives from other companies. So we're able to close and actually gain agreement for additional follow-up meetings with these providers. So I think that alone speaks volumes about the value that we're continuing to bring to our customers, even in these virtual times. So you can still be successful in a virtual mode. There's no doubt about it. So if I had a crystal ball, I would definitely say that I think virtual is here to stay, at least for some part. And maybe it's going to end up being more of a hybrid-based role. Maybe we'll do a little bit of both. I guess time will tell, but all we can do now is control the controllables, and we're in the environment that we're in, so we just have to embrace it.
So true. And again, if you're hearing from customers, that's some of the best feedback you can get as a sales professional, is for your customers to tell you that the way you're coming in and approaching them is different and having impact. So it's a great takeaway. Holly, how about you? One or two takeaways from being part of this experience, and then again, pull the crystal ball out. What's coming next?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that this environment is evolving, and I think we started back in March, and I kind of think about it in segments. We went from kind of March to June, and then we thought, well, the summer's going to be different, things are going to open up, and then now here we are in the fall, and things seem to be slowing down a little bit. And I think my biggest takeaway is these skills that we've been able to learn and focus on are going to be, skills that we're going to be able to continue to use as this pandemic ebbs and flows, which it has been. And I would say my crystal ball, I heard a statistic the other day that it was a survey of healthcare professionals, And they said they believe that 1 year from now, 50% of their interactions with us in the pharmaceutical industry will be virtual. So that tells me that this is not going away for sure.
Yeah, so you and Kristen are, I think, on the same page there, that this is not a short-term thing. We're in this for the long haul, so certainly not things that are lost or done in vain. So Holly, thank you. Alan, how about you? Leading the charge and getting a program like this implemented. Before we get to some questions from the audience, couple takeaways from you as a learning professional, and anything you might see coming next.
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, this is a foundational program. So we're looking just to build upon this. So one, listen to the reps, listen to the sales managers, hear what's going on, and then create a solution. But really, it's taking what we've learned from the pre and post application from the coaching sessions and seeing if there's any areas where we can come in and continue to build more capabilities around those particular skill sets. So for us, it's taking what we've learned in this program and then pulling it through and just building on it, because really learning never ends. So that's what we're going to be focusing on going forward.
Absolutely. Well, having a program, something, whether it's this program or any other, does give you the opportunity to uncover the gaps. And if it's something foundational, if it's something new, if it's something technology related, you now have the power to go and be very intentional with what you put in front of your groups next. And that is no small task here, going toward the end of the year and looking at a 2021 ahead of us. So I'll thank you guys quickly now, and we'll do it again in a moment for going through that discussion and sharing some of your experiences. I do have a couple of questions that I'll share here with just a few minutes left. The first question came in from someone who has since left, unfortunately, but I still want to ask it. And her question was about soft skills. Are you guys doing anything with soft skills? So we talked a lot about selling skills in this conversation, but soft skills, like how do you show up on video, lighting maybe, and to try to make yourself look a little more, I don't know if professional is the right word, but are you doing anything with that? Have you seen anything internally? That was the question.
Yeah, Dave, we have lots of best practices. Many different teams have created takeaways for teams on how to use the right lighting and what's behind you and the colors to wear and how to engage people and microphones. So yeah, we have lots of different tools and resources, and people have a selection of things to pick from what resonates with them. So we have.
Yeah, I think that's, again, if there's a third track here, if it's the technology, how do you use Zoom or Viva Engage or whatever platform, that's probably track one. Track two is a lot of the skill stuff we talked about today. I do think that other third track, if this is here to stay, if 50% of healthcare providers think we're going to be doing this a year from now, the people who show up well and can present very professionally, I do think we'll find greater success potentially. So that's awesome that you're doing it, and a really good question from the group. A second question here is about kind of what was covered. I hope I'm interpreting this question correctly, about what did the application, when you talk about the measurement, the application measurement you did, the question I think is, what did it cover? And so do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with sort of the rubric and how those coaching sessions went, so that this audience member can kind of understand what was covered in that application measurement piece?
Or I'll pass that on to Holly. She's been coaching people from
That's
the
true.
beginning. So Holly, would you be able to talk to that?
Sure, absolutely. So each webinar that the representatives attended, the manager, tried to attend as their schedule would allow, and the content of that particular webinar focused on a certain a certain skill. So like the first one was building rapport. So we'll use that for an example. So an hour was spent sharing ideas, talking about some concepts around how to build rapport, how to open a call, how to bring in the healthcare professional and the office staff. Then when we did the role play, we had a specific scenario that was specific to that webinar, along with some criteria. And the criteria that we needed to look for in the role play was very well laid out and specific. to those skills involved with that particular webinar. So, and it was done immediately, almost immediately within a few days after the webinar. So it was done before to get a baseline with that representative, and then after to see the improvement that they had after they went through the webinar. So points were assigned to each criteria, and then added up and scored that way, just to give us an idea and to see a level of improvement. I hope that
So
answers
across
the
the
question.
webinar, each of the topics in the webinar had their own set of criteria. So that was really what the application covered.
Yep.
Totally makes sense. And I know we're right at the top of the hour, but there was one more question if we can sneak it in. And it's a question about marketing and engagement strategy. Has that changed at your organization? And again, you can probably only be as specific as you're allowed to be around things like strategy to better suit digital sales team. So maybe at a high level, have you seen a change organizationally that Alan, you would be responsible for then training to as far as a change, or just again, be as comfortable as you want to be answering that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So, things keep evolving within marketing, and then, our whole digital space, and reps not having as much access. Obviously, I think any company is probably looking at a more digital way of engaging or contacting their customers, and we definitely are. But right now, our focus is really about continuing to maximize our sales force and how they can have an impact to our customers. And what we're calling is an engagement model, is how do we engage our customers? So it's less of a per se a sales call, it's more of an engagement model. So I think that may answer the question, is that we're doing it, but we're evolving our sales approach to be more of an engagement approach.
Which is going to be required if we're virtual. It's all about engagement, having these kinds of interactions. And that said, we're a minute over, but I see a lot of people hung in there the whole way. So it's an hour out of your day in a virtual scenario. So we're really grateful for that. Let me say thank you again to Kristen, to Holly, to Alan for being here today, for being part of this panel discussion. I think there's a lot of value that hopefully our participants were able to glean from your experiences. I will share, and hopefully you can see my screen still at this point. I'm not sure what is going on the screen, but if you do want to connect with me, my name is Dave Noonan. You can see my email address there. I know I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, as are some of our participants here. So feel free to reach out and connect. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, audience. It's an exciting conference to kind of think about what is next in our ever-evolving space, and I wish you absolute all the best of luck. Have a great rest of your day. Bye, guys.
Bye, Dave.
Bye.
Thank you.